This video is, or series of videos, because you know there'll be like a million of them, is looking at Hitler's rise to power and consolidation of rule, how he organized the state, essentially how he went from an elected position to an authoritarian. Okay, and our learning outcomes are to look at the methods used to come to power, the methods used to consolidate his rule, and then look at the organization of the state and in what ways it reflects the ideology that we've spoken about at length previously. And let's begin with the nitty gritty. So, if you remember from our talk of the Weimar Republic, this is the flow of chancellors since basically March 1930, right? Bruning takes over from Mueller, who resigns, and then we move to von Papen, Schleicher, and Hitler. And if you remember, essentially a lot of these, it was the decisions that were made by these chancellors that helped the Nazis come to power. And it was namely the constant calling of elections, which gave the Nazis the opportunity to increase their position in the Reichstag. And they had to keep calling these elections because there was no single majority within the Reichstag. So it's really hard to get the business of government done if you can't agree enough to pass any laws. Now, von Papen made a whole lot of bad decisions, y'all. So basically, as we know, he recalled the law that had been placed by Bruning on these Free Corps and the SA. To try to cut down on street violence, which of course means that the recruiting arm of the Nazis goes out in full force. The other things, of course, is he calls for elections, and eventually Hindenburg is like, he's old, he's tired, he's frustrated that he can't get a majority government to pass stuff. And so eventually he uses his powers to get rid of von Papen and put Schleicher in place. Essentially, Schleicher comes in because Hindenburg is doing everything that he can not to appoint Hitler. He doesn't like Hitler. He doesn't like the Nazis. He doesn't like Hitler. He doesn't like him socially as a person, and he doesn't like the ideology. And so he puts Schleicher in place. And Schleicher lasts for 2 whole months. I know, 2 whole months. And what Schleicher tries to do is to kind of sow dissension within the Nazi party. And he tries to negotiate with this dude named Strasser, who was more leftist than Hitler, and so it was kind of his way to dismantle the Nazi party from within, trying to bribe Strasser with vice chancellorship. It didn't work, and after 2 months, Hindenburg replaces Schleicher and essentially has no choice but to appoint Hitler. And in January 1933, from this point, Hitler uses a variety of means to consolidate and secure his power. And one thing that you should do, because it's written in red, is to pause and consider, why do you think Hitler would have to work hard to consolidate and secure his power? Pause and answer, and try to write a well-developed answer. We move on. So one of the things to consider, of course, is this whole issue of cabinet members. There were limited powers granted by Hindenburg, and von Papen was vice chancellor. So I gave you some things to think about and try to develop your answer with. And von Papen also said, "We will have pushed Hitler so far into a corner, he'll squeak." So consider these, pause, answer. Here we have an image of Hitler chatting with one of his buddies, Goering, in the cabinet, while some of the other cabinet members look on. What will follow for the next bit is a timeline, because it's really a tight period of time with in which he consolidates his power and places himself as the leader of a single party state. So in January 30, 1933, Hindenburg gives in. Even though he doesn't like Hitler, he realizes that the flip flopping and the constant turnover of chancellors is not good for the state. They can't get anything done. And even though the numbers that the Nazis had in the Reichstag at this point had declined, they were still the single largest party. And so this was an opportunity for somebody with a majority, or or really doesn't need that much more to create a majority, to be able to going. Now, one of the things that is going to be really significant to this is to Hitler's rise and consolidation is the Reichstag fire that occurs in 1933. As you know from looking at Hitler's ideology, democracy, a constitutional government was not where Hitler wanted to end up. And so essentially, he is going to take the opportunity to consolidate to his rule. And so initially, he was looking toward the election that was to take place in February 1933. And since the last election, the Nazi numbers had dropped in the Reichstag, and so what he really wanted to do was try to improve the position of the Nazis, to give them a clear majority. And to do this, he's going to demand immediate elections. And the thing is that the Nazis are better at this whole election stuff because they have better access to media. And one of the things of the Nazi Party is that they were making use of new forms of media like the radio. And he has this ability to weaken his opposition. And so the Nazi Party rolls out a massive propaganda campaign, trying to get all of those different groups that we spoke about previously to the polls to vote for them. And one of the dudes in the cabinet, Goering, had essentially control over Prussia. And he had the ability to control the police and civil services in Prussia. Again, Prussia has the single largest population and and therefore the single largest block of votes and seats within the Reichstag. So by controlling the civil and the civil service and the police, he kind of has an influence as to how the elections go and who has the ability to participate. But then they're going to get an opportunity handed to them, and that comes with the Reichstag fire on February 27. And the Reichstag is the parliament building. Oh, I wrote that. And what he does swiftly is accuses the communists of having set the fire. And he convinces Hindenburg to declare a state of emergency. And one of the things to remember about this state of emergency is it essentially means that civil rights are suspended. And the Reichstag fire is this, for years, the Nazis had been warning people about the danger that the communists posed to the fabric of the country and the German people. And here you have the burning of the Reichstag, which had been there for a super long time and was a symbol, this really massive symbol of Germany. And there the communists are attacking it. Therefore, the communists are attacking the fabric of the state. And people are frightened. And he issues the Decree for the Protection of the People and the State in February 1928, the day after, and it suspends civil liberties until further notice. Essentially, this decree is in place for the entirety of Nazi control of Germany. So this state of emergency lasts forever, and people never reclaim the civil liberties that were suspended at this point. I would like you to recall one of the previous quotes from Mein Kampf that alludes to this. Essentially, people are frightened so much that they're willing to give up the civil liberties at this time. And nobody speaks up when the communists are targeted, trade union leaders are arrested. And this removal of the communists essentially puts Hitler and the Nazis in a much better place for the upcoming elections. So with these elections, essentially the communists had been the rival for power within the Reichstag, because one of the things during this time period is the move towards extremism on both ends of the spectrums. So the Nazis now have 44% of the vote. This essentially unsettles their opponents. It keeps them unstable and kind of unable to react or to regroup, to form coalitions of their own to oppose the Nazis within the Reichstag. And so the other thing that happens is the Democrats, people were resigned, people were tired, and so that people lacked energy to oppose the Nazis. And so they kind of dropped the ball, hey? And then, of course, the Nazis they control the state media, and Goering is in charge of a really large portion of the state media, and there's this use of emergency decrees. And the SS and the SA start taking over town halls and police headquarters and essentially controlling these important services and guarantors of civil liberties, right? And one of the things you can say, of course, is that that there was limited resistance, but of course these guys have guns and stuff, right? And so all of the communists have been expelled from the Reichstag. So essentially, they place themselves as the dominant party. Now, of course, the Nazis still don't have full control of the Reichstag. The communists are gone, but there's still some of these other groups there. And so one of the things that they have to do is undermine the Constitution, undermine the democracy in and of itself. So the Enabling Act is passed in March of 1933, and the Enabling Act essentially reduces the powers of the Reichstag. The only group or political party to oppose this Enabling Act is the Social Democratic Party. And the Enabling Act transfers all of the legislative, that is, the law-making powers of the state, and the law enforcement powers of the state into the hands of the Chancellor. If you don't remember that or haven't figured that out, Hitler, for 4 years. All right. So basically, people are still afraid of what had happened with the Reichstag fire, and the propaganda that the Nazis put out definitely was working their minds. And of course, people are just resigned to the difficult situation, and nobody speaks up. he convinces the Catholic Center Party to pass these constitutional changes, i.e., the Enabling Act, with the promise of leaving the Catholic Church alone. So again, we can say, yes, Hitler definitely played a part. Yes, Hitler destroyed the democracy of the Weimar Republic. However, he didn't do it alone. All right, and so one of the things that he said is Christianity had the most important. Christianity was one of the most important factors for the maintenance of our society, and would permit and guarantee for the Christian denominations the enjoyment of their due influence in schools and education. So essentially, with this, he said to these groups, to the Center Party, hey, the privileges that you as a religious institution enjoy in the country, you get to keep that. Just vote for this Enabling Act. And they did. The Social Democratic Party, by this point, are weakened. They've lost a lot of members. They do not have the ability to block Hitler, especially once he makes coalitions with the Center Party. And of course, he got rid of the communists, and the nationalist parties were already willing to work with him. Essentially, now Hitler has the ability to make laws without the Reichstag. He has placed himself as the dictator. But wait, there's more. So the next video will follow with a remainder of the timeline and consolidation of rule.